My name is Alan Scott, and I'm the author of the Storm series, which currently consists of 3 novels and 3 books of short stories. Today I'm going to read my short story called Tea. This tale is dedicated to a lady called Lisa W., who lives in Texas in the USA. The reason for this dedication is really rather simple. Without her, this story can never have been told. Let me explain. Lisa had stumbled across my Facebook page for my books and had liked my page. We'd ended up chatting, and Lisa said to my great surprise that actually she quite enjoyed my first book, Echoes of a Storm. To cut a long story short, Lisa kindly agreed to give me feedback on my second book, Signs of the Storm, and to do some editing and proofreading for me. Hence, I sent her the first part of Scions. Lisa came back with some excellent constructive feedback and the fact that she really liked the characters Samuel and Belinda, which was a shame as I was about to actually kill them off in a suitably gory way. This left me in a bit of a quandary. Do I kill the characters as planned, or do I save them? I decided to save them. So the next problem was how. After 3 hours of drinking tea, pacing, eating wine gums, the answer finally came to me, and the character's shadow killer came into being. That afternoon I started the rewrite, and by 7 o'clock that night Samuel and Belinda had been saved from a grisly and horrible death. As it turned out, Lisa had done me a huge favour, as I used Samuel and Belinda later on to solve a number of plotline problems I was having. However, don't tell her that or I'll never hear the end of it. To thank her for her help, I said I would write Lisa a story. This is the story I wrote for her. It is called Tea. I hope you enjoy it, Lisa. Tea by Alan Scott. It was perishingly cold, and Samuel Clegg was extremely glad of the thick warm cloak which was currently wrapped tightly around him as he made his way home after visiting the bustling marketplace in his hometown of Idris. Even with his thick mittens, his hands felt like ice. Mind you, his hands always felt like ice nowadays. It's so cold even breathing hurts, thought Samuel, as he watched the thick plumes of white air leave his mouth, and prepared himself for another burning breath as he inhaled the freezing air. Snow covered the roofs of the houses and lay thickly on the ground in the spaces where few people went. It was not the snow that bothered Samuel. In fact, he quite liked snow. Rather, it was the traitorous ice that it hid. Normally he would have never ventured out on a day like this, but today was no ordinary day. Today, or should that be tonight, was the long night, the night when the shadows were at their deepest and darkest. Looking downwards in an attempt to spot patches of black ice, Samuel continued his slow and steady walk, clutching his precious tight package to his chest. Suddenly, the sound of laughing children made him look up. He stopped moving and tried to make him very small as the kids came hurtling towards him. Closing his eyes and holding his breath, Samuel felt them rush past, barely a hair's breadth away, and then they were gone, racing on, heedless of the danger of ice or snow, as he laughed and mucked about. As the cries of merriment receded, Samuel opened his eyes and let out a breath. "Are you okay? Those little hooligans nearly knocked you over," said a woman's concerned voice. "Yes, I'm okay, thank you." They should get a hand across the back of their head running around like that, nearly knocking people over. "They're young and it was harmless," said Samuel. "At their age, they are indestructible and they think everyone else is as well." "That's very forgiving of you." "We were all young once." Samuel tried to smile in the biting cold. "For some of us, that was a long time ago." "Here, take my arm," said the woman. Samuel gratefully slipped his arm under the woman's and held tight. "Thank you. I'm Samuel." "I'm Margot." "Now where do you live, Samuel?" "Just over there," Samuel indicated with a nod of his head. "It's not too far." The two of them started to walk in the direction indicated. "Where is your family?" asked Margot. "Oh, they live far away in Deep Lake City." "Have you no wife?" Samuel smiled a tired smile. "No, I have no wife." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause you any discomfort. Has she passed away?" Not wanting to explain his life to a stranger, he simply said, "Yes." "You know, that tailor lives around here somewhere," said Margot, changing the subject. "You know, the war hero, the one that stopped the Brethren of the Night from sneaking in and murdering us all." "Yes, I believe he does live around here somewhere," confirmed Samuel. "I was only a girl of 6 when the siege happened." "Where did the Margot, whispered Samuel. But I can still remember the crowds and the cheering, continued Margot. Samuel smiled and said nothing. What was his name? I think it was Steve Clegg or something like that. Something like that, agreed Samuel Krieg. Anyway, we must be getting near your house. Where is it? Just over there, Margot. Come on then, you're almost home. I wonder where Steve lives, muttered Margot as she looked around. Sorry? You know, Steve, the tailor, the war hero. I wonder where he lives. Not far from here, I'm sure, said Samuel straight-faced. Went Margot, still looking around. This is my house, indicated Samuel. It's a nice little house. Yes, I like it. Are you going to be okay, Samuel? Yes, thank you, Margot, and thank you for your kindness. Oh, think nothing of it. Glad I could help. Are you sure you're going to be okay? Yes, positive. Right, I'm off. With that, Margot walked away, casually looking left and right as she searched for the elusive house of the war hero tailor. Samuel watched her for a moment. The tailor's name was Samuel Craig, and he was no hero. He was scared to death that night, all those years ago. Opening his door, Samuel entered his house. After throwing another 2 logs on the fire, which was blazing away quite merrily in the hearth, Samuel leant back in his chair and rubbed his hands together, trying unsuccessfully to massage the low-level pain away. Being a tailor, his hands had always been nimble and agile, but that had been many years ago. Now they were just gnarled, slow, and only occasionally worked properly. You're just old, you old fool, he said out loud to the empty room. Wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, Samuel looked round the quiet and still room. As always, it was neat and tidy, with everything in its proper place. Looking towards his only window, he could see ice forming on the inside, even though it was only late morning. It'll be a cold one tonight, he thought to himself. Pulling the blanket closer, he went through his list for tonight. Tea, water, sugar, cups, spoon, cake, second chair by the fire. Happy that he had everything, Samuel turned his gaze to the fire and watched the flames dance. His thoughts drifted back to that night 25 years ago. He and Belinda had lived in a different part of the city then. They had lived above his old tailor shop. The city had been under siege by an army from Yidris. Captain Hughes of the city guard was leading a valiant defence of the city with the limited number of men at his disposal. The siege had been going on for a week, and there had been high casualties on both sides. The weather was getting worse, and if the besieged army was supposed to win, they needed to get into the city gates quickly. Then, on that fateful night, the Brethren and Knight had managed to break through near the merchants' district. Samuel shuddered at the thought of the Brethren. They were the corrupt worshippers of the creature known as the Midnight Man. They believed that only through pain and falling their most base and deprived nature could they truly be free and be worthy of the Midnight Man. There had been horrific stories of what they had done to captured prisoners, along with tales of cannibalism and the most depraved sexual acts. With the Brethren threatening to break through at any minute, a frantic call had been gone out to the people of the merchant area to help support the limited number of guards and soldiers who were trying to hold the breach. Men were answering the call and leaving their houses with whatever weapons they could find before making their way towards the sound of fighting. Samuel recalled taking a poker from the fireplace and heading for the door. Belinda had asked him what the blazes was he doing. He had answered, "It's time for me to be a man." With Belinda screaming at him not to be a fool, he had walked out the door, scared to death, and his heart beating wildly. Every step took a huge amount of effort as he moved towards the fighting. He was a tailor. He didn't want to die. He didn't even know how to fight. As he neared the breach, Samuel heard the sound of battle, the screams of dying men, the clash of metal on metal, the shouts and the battle cries. Standing there confused and not sure what to do, Samuel stood still and raised his poker above his head, looking for someone to hit. Then, from his right, 4 men rushed out of the darkness towards him, obviously in full retreat, quickly followed by a chasing group of enemy soldiers. Standing there, Samuel suddenly realised he was about to be run over. He tried to get out of the way, but it was too late in moving, and instead he was knocked to the ground. which actually saved his life. As he hit the hard dirt, he heard a noise like a swarm of angry bees fly over his head. Scrambling to see what had happened, he saw both groups of men lying dead with various numbers of arrows sticking out of them. As more men rushed past him, making their way to the battle, Samuel remained on his knees, searching the gloom of the night for his poker. All around him he could hear the screams of the dying and the cries of the wounded as he searched and searched for his poker. Finally giving up, he picked up a sword and stood up. Standing there by himself, Samuel saw, even with his untrained eye, that the skirmish was lost. The enemy was winning and was about to flood into the city. Samuel took a step forward and gripped his sword hilt. It was then that he heard the growls come from the shadows. With a start, Samuel woke up and looked around confused. The room was dark. The only light was from the low glow from the now small fly on the hearth. "Oh no," he said. "It's all right, old friend," a voice said from behind him. "I've only just arrived." Samuel painfully twisted around in the chair and watched as a slight middle-aged man stepped into view from the dark. "Shadow Killer, I'm so sorry. I fell asleep." "It's all right, Samuel," said Shadow Killer as he sat down in the chair opposite and crossed his legs. "Though I really love a cup of tea." Yes, of course." Samuel pushed himself up the chair. "I'll get everything right away." Samuel started to make his way towards the only other room on the ground floor, his pantry, when he stopped and turned round. "The fire! I must put up the fire." "It's okay, Samuel. I will see to the fire." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Thank you," said Samuel as he proceeded to the pantry. Shadow Killer watched thoughtfully for a moment as the slow old man made his way through the dark, cold room, before turning his attention to the hearth and stoking up the fire. It took Samuel 15 minutes to sort everything out while his guest sat in the chair and watched. Finally, Samuel lowered himself into his seat and pulled the blanket around his shoulders. "Ah, that's better." He smiled as the heat of the fire started to warm his legs. "You feel the cold more nowadays?" "Yes, I'm getting old and the winters seem to be getting colder." "I see." With some effort, Samuel pulled a small table closer. On the table were 2 wooden mugs, a full kettle, a teapot, a bowl of sugar, 2 spoons, 2 wooden plates, a knife and a plum cake. "I went out this morning and bought a plum cake for you. I remembered how you said you liked plum cake. That was kind of you, Samuel." Lifting the kettle, Samuel slipped the handle over a metal pole which was secured to the wall on a pivot. With a gentle push, the kettle swung out over the fire. "Would you like a piece of cake?" "No, thank you. I think I'll wait till the tea is ready." Samuel smiled and nodded and leaned back in his seat. Shadow Killer made himself comfortable in the chair. "We've been doing this a long time now." "Almost 25 years. Ever since you saved me for the second time, Shadow Killer." "Almost 25 years," Shadow Killer mused. "In that case, you'd better call me by my other name." "Other name?" "Well, you can hardly keep on calling me by my Devere name." "What is your other name?" "William." "Nice to meet you, William." William inclined his head in acknowledgement. Both men remained silent as they watched the kettle boil, neither of them feeling the need to fill the silence. As he waited, Samuel let his thoughts drift back to that day all those years ago. The enemy were just about to flood through the breach when he had heard the menacing growls and a shiver had run through him. Half turning, he had seen Shadow Killer step from the darkest shadows and walk unhurriedly towards him, totally ignoring the torch-carrying mob that was now flowing into the city. "Good evening, Samuel," he had said. "Shadow Killer," he had replied, pointing at the men charging towards them. "Oh yes, I have no wish to be interrupted." Pointing his arm in the same direction as Samuel was pointing, Shadow Killer simply said, "Kill." From the shadows, numerous Deveres appeared, their growls and howls filling the air as they surged forward. Samuel watched as the human-shaped beasts ripped and tore into the enemy army, their claws and razor-sharp teeth making a mockery of the light armour the brethren and their allies were wearing. "They are my personal bodyguard. I think you'll find they will not be stirred for the next few moments." Samuel continued to stare at the vision now of dark and bloody hell that was taking place before his eyes. Samuel? Samuel, look at me. We need to talk. What about? Asked Samuel as he reluctantly looked at Shadow Killer, whilst fighting the urge to turn his head back to the grisly scene being played out behind him. You owe me your life now, therefore you're in debt to me. What do you want from me? Samuel asked as fear crept into his voice. Simply this. On the darkest day of the year, I will visit you, and you will make me a cup of tea. We will talk the night through, and then I will leave. This will happen until the day you die. You want me to make you tea? Yes. Why? Asked a very confused Samuel. Because you're very good at making tea. And if I refuse? Shadow Killer remained silent. Of course you knew I wouldn't refuse, said Samuel. Pardon? What? Said Samuel, returning fully to the present. You said, of course you knew I wouldn't refuse. Have you been thinking about the night we made the agreement? Yes, said Samuel. Kettle's boiling, said William. What? Oh yes, thank you, said Samuel as he picked up his fire poker and used it to swing the kettle from over the fire back towards him. William watched silently as Samuel made the tea and sliced up the plum cake. Finally said, Do you still miss Belinda? Samuel handed William the mug of tea. Yes, I do. How long's she been gone now? It was 5 years ago she passed on. William raised his eyebrows. 5 years? It only seems like 5 minutes. It was 5 years last month. It was so stupid how it happened. She got caught in the rain, got soaked coming home from market, and then for some reason refused to get dried off properly. Hence she caught a cold, which got into her lungs. Within 2 weeks she was dead. I remember thinking as she lay there on the bed how small and fragile she looked. At least she did not die alone. No, I held her hand as she passed away. Unsure of what to say, William took a sip of his tea. Sometimes I think I'm cursed. Why is that, Samuel? I seem to outlive everyone I love or care about. Samuel handed a plate containing a slice of plum cake to William. Thank you, said William, taking the plate and placing it down next to the fire. Ah, yes, your lover, Jack. Though he's been dead for over 40 years now. It's strange, William. I was only with Jack a year, but his face and smile still burned brightly in my mind's eye. William thought to himself, You're not with him long for things to go stale or sour, and with each intervening year he's become more of a man that he really was. However, to Samuel he simply said, What about your adopted son, Rab, and his family? Oh, they're safe and living in Deep Lake. He's doing well for himself. Have they visited since we last met? No, I have not seen them for over 4 years now, but his wife writes every 2 months and keeps me informed what's going on. I look forward to those letters. A sadness entered Samuel's voice. They are all I really have left to keep me going. William took a sip of his tea. It was a very good cup of tea. Before putting down his mug and taking a bite of the plum cake. A moment or two later he spoke. That is very good plum cake, Samuel. Thank you. William took another bite. Samuel stretched his fingers, trying to ease the pain that seemed to permanently be there now that he was old. I used to have wonderful hands, he silently mused. Casting a quick glance at William, he wondered, How old are you, William? Do you get aches and pains? Does the loss of your arm affect you? I remember being in shock when you arrived for the first time with your arm missing, and I've never really actually been brave enough to ask what happened. Picking up his own mug of tea, Samuel took a sip. A copper for your thoughts, said William. Samuel was silent for a moment. Then, for some unknown reason, he felt emboldened. Why did you save me again, William? I saved you because you made a good cup of tea. No. That's not the reason. You came into the middle of a battle and saved my life. Why? William's eyes hardened and a cold, neutral tone replied, accept the answer, Taylor. No, said Samuel. I've just worked out that I am old. What do I have to fear? Death? Well, he'll be coming for me shortly anyway. Pain? I'm in low-level pain every day, and with my frail body, I would not last long if you hit or tortured me. William continued his steely gaze. Samuel leaned forward. How old are you, William? William stayed silent. How old are you, old friend? William lowered his gaze for a moment before looking into the fire. I have been in this body for over 600 years. Samuel leaned back in his chair, his eyes wide. 600 years, he whispered. Good grief. It's a long time. 600 years, repeated Samuel. And you are the first person to even offer me a cup of tea. Really? I'm either killing people, or if I'm protecting them, they want to get rid of me as soon as possible. Hence, no one's actually ever offered me a cup of tea. Look at us, laughed Samuel. We're two old men talking by a fire, drinking tea and eating cake. I suppose we are, smiled William. I suppose we are. What's it like being a Devere? Asked Samuel. What do you mean? Well, what is it like to have your soul bonded to another? It's so long ago now that I can't remember any other way of life, to be honest with you. Shadow Killer and I are now one and the same person. Do you not remember any of your past life as William? I remember very little and I care even less. That's sad. Why? You should always remember where you come from. What if where you come from was not a very nice place? It does not matter, said Samuel stubbornly. You should always remember where you come from. William shrugged his shoulders and took a sip of tea. Samuel scrutinised William's face. I bet that someone made you a cup of tea when you were young. A cup of tea, for some reason, meant something to you. William gave a quick smile in reply. I knew it, said Samuel happily. William looked into the fire. When I made you that tea, it reminded you of that special time. I think, for all your power and strength, and even then, 25 years ago, the weight of all those years were starting to be a heavy load, and you just wanted... I just wanted a nice cup of tea and a sit-down, finished William, as he continued to stare into the fire. Me, Shadow Killer, the most dangerous Devere, just wanted a cup of tea and a sit-down. Turned to look at Samuel, he said, sad, isn't it? No, it's not. No? No, confirmed Samuel. William propped his head up using his only arm. I had my people watch you constantly. They were under strict orders to contact me the instant you were in danger, so I could save you and force you into our agreement. Blimey, is my tea that good? Yes, but what I really wanted was one night a year just to sit down and talk with someone and to remember what it was like to be normal. Anyway, one night I'm told that you are doing something bloody stupid like. I was told that you decided that you were going to fight the Brethren of the Night. What on earth possessed you to do that? My city needed me. Rubbish. I needed to protect Belinda. Again, rubbish. Okay. I was fed up being protected. My city needed me and I wanted to be there. I am a man, Samuel said with surprising amount of anger. But you're a gay tailor. What's that got to do with it? I am a man. All my life, people have been either trying to beat me up or feel sorry for me, or I've had women tell me their problems, about how men don't understand them, and how good it is to talk to a man who fully understands. Then they give me that annoying look. The anger that I'd been unlying anger that had been lying and simmering quietly within Samuel just suddenly erupted. I am not a woman trapped in a man's body. I am a man. I just prefer men over women. My city needed me, and I wanted to go. I wanted to defend my city against the evil that was attacking it. Suddenly the anger drained out of Samuel, and he slumped in his chair. That's been building for a while, hasn't it? Samuel nodded his head as he held his hand over his mouth. Do you know what I think, Samuel? Samuel shook his head. I think you look forward to our chats. I think you look forward to talking to a man who treats you as a man, not as a gay man. Samuel smiled and nodded. However, let's get one thing clear. You have the bumps in the wrong place for me, said William. William, said Samuel, I think you're a bit old for me at 600 years. I prefer men to still have some life in them. No offence. None taken. Glad we got that sorted out. Both men sat quietly enjoying their tea and cake. It was Samuel who finally broke the silence. How did you lose your arm, William? I've never dared ask before, but since we seem to be talking openly, I thought I would ask. William stared into the deep shadows in the far corner of the room as if watching some distant events unfold. The events from the year of death did not reach this far north, did they? No Idris was safe from the horrors. You used the right word, Samuel. Horrors. 20 years later, the countries of Yeris and its neighbours Balkan are still devastated in parts, and as you know, the twin kingdoms did not escape unscratched. The coastal town of Safe Harbour was wiped from the face of the map, and the brutal events of the town of Oakton will forever be remembered. Samuel shuddered despite the cold. They say the dead walked in vast numbers, as far as I could see. William lowered his gaze and looked straight at Samuel. The year of death was well named, but it was a mere skirmish between those across the water and those across the desert. A skirmish? Yes, a skirmish. A skirmish where vast numbers of Dever, Twiver, Merver and Chosen died. A skirmish that even took my arm. How did you lose your arm, William? In the final battle, the forces I commanded went against the Sun Guard. Oh my, said Samuel as his eyes widened. You've heard of them then? I think everyone has heard of the dreaded Sun Guard. Oh, one of them took my arm, sliced it clean off at the shoulder. Did it hurt? Asked Samuel. William looked perplexed at Samuel for a moment before bursting out laughing. Just a little. Just a little. Unsure how to react to the laughter, Samuel looked round and spied the teapot. More tea, William? Composing himself, William passed his mug across. Please, Samuel, please. Samuel did the honours and returned the mug. Sorry, he said sheepishly. Don't worry, you have to laugh, otherwise you'd cry. Shaking his head, William continued. Did it hurt? I did not know what else to say. I suppose not. So you were there at the end, William, when Jack Rothgall was finally betrayed by his sister Rebecca? William suddenly became very serious. Yes, I was there at the end. Samuel tried to keep his composure under Shadow Killer's penetrating gaze and swallowed hard before asking, Is what they say true? A lot of people say a lot of things. Those that were there know the truth, and that is all that matters. And the truth is, once the battle was won, Jack Rothgall, the grandson of Nathaniel West, vanished, stated William. Samuel looked peeved. You're being evasive, William. Some say he was murdered by his sister. Some say he died of his wounds. Some say that he vanished into the night. And some say he roams the devastated borderlands, protecting anyone against further invasion. Which is true, William? All I know is truly known is that he is gone and that his sister, Rebecca Rothgall, rules the Twin Kingdoms, and that she has become simply known as the Guardian Queen. Yes, I know about the Guardian Queen. My son's wife has mentioned it in her letters. My daughter-in-law says she dresses only in black to honour those that fell in battle, that she wears her hair short to honour those civilians that died in the conflict, and finally that she lights 7 candles every night to honour the children whose lives were blighted by the conflict. I too have heard this, confirmed William. Also, she's opened a number of branches of chestnuts in most large towns to help with the increased number of orphans the war produced. Chestnuts? The name of the children's home our mother started almost 50 years ago. The first one was here in Idris. Why did she call it chestnuts? I don't know. Maybe she liked chestnuts. William rubbed his shoulder where his arm used to be. Maybe she did. They say that the final battle was like no other, that the forces unleashed there were devastating, pushed Samuel. William closed his eyes and massaged his forehead. You just won't let it drop, will you? I just want to know what happened. You just want to know what happened, said William through clenched teeth. Yes, Samuel replied. Shadow Killer snapped his eyes open. I will tell you what happened, little tailor man. Creatures from your darkest nightmares ripped each other apart, an orgy of death and destruction, the likes of which you can never imagine. My brother Dever died by the hundreds, and I don't mean the low caste. I mean the upper caste Devers, the strongest of our kind. Samuel shrunk back into his seat under an intense stare of Shadow Killer. Do you know how many Dever, Merver, Trever, Chosen died that day? No. No, you don't, shouted Shadow Killer. I will tell you, little tailor. Thousands died that day. Thousands. Thousands died to save the lives of people of this land and protect those across the water. Shadow Killer got up and leaned over Samuel. Those bastards across the water saved my people to fight their battles. One day we will have a revenge on them. Samuel nodded his head vigorously. Shadow Killer looked in disgust at Samuel. Bah, he said dismissively. Returned to his seat, he closed his eyes and once again massaged his temples. Samuel sat silent and still as he watched Shadow Killer fearfully. The power that was released by both sides that day was almost beyond comprehension, and when that was exhausted, those that were left fought with tooth, claw and steel. Finally, Jack Rothgar and what was left of his bodyguard managed to assault the position where the enemy generals were. Within the hour the battle was won. William opened his eyes. Count yourself lucky, little tailor, that you were not there. I do, whispered Samuel. An uncomfortable silence reigned for almost 15 minutes before William said, I could do with another cup of tea. I'll brew a fresh one, said Samuel eagerly, as he reached down and picked up a canteen of water. I always like to make sure I have plenty of water. William forced a smile. Samuel set about boiling the water as William sat, eyes closed, slowly massaging his brow. Leaning back in his chair, waiting for the water to boil, Samuel stole a quick glance at William and thought, I'm sorry, Shadow Killer. I did not mean to reopen old wounds and old memories. I just want to know what happened. Turning his attention to the near pitch-black room, Samuel looked round and sighed gently. Shivering, he pulled the blanket close around his shoulders. It must be a really cold night if I'm feeling this cold near the fire. I should really be wrapped up in a warm bed, he thought, sighing again. You sigh a lot, don't you, said William. Do I? Yes. Oh, sorry. Only the crackling noise from the fire broke the silence as Samuel waited for the water to boil. As the steam started to flow from the kettle, Samuel busied himself making tea and pouring 2 cups. Your tea's ready, William. Opening his eyes and reaching forward, William said, Thank you. You're welcome. Both men sat and sipped their tea in silence, once again lost in their own thoughts and memories of the past. Samuel tried to stifle a yawn but failed. The darkness, the silence, and the fire was making him drowsy. Time ticked on, and Samuel felt his eyes starting to close of their own accord. William waited patiently until he heard the gentle snoring coming from the chair opposite before opening his eyes and placing his empty mug down. Looking at the fire, he threw 3 logs on and made sure it was safe. Next he stood up and walked to the slumbering Samuel. "Thank you for the tea and your companionship, old friend," he said quietly, before making sure that the blanket was securely wrapped around Samuel's shoulders. "I will miss our chats." Taking one final look at Samuel, Shadow Killer stepped into the shadows and vanished. Queen Rebecca Rothgall sat on the balcony, her hands crossed and placed on her lap, as she braved the cold to watch the sunrise over the lake that gave the city its name. Without turning around, she greeted her guests as she felt him near. "Good morning, Shadow Killer." "Good morning, Your Majesty." "How is he?" "Old." Rebecca took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Did you have your tea?" "Yes." Rebecca nodded and smiled. I'm glad you enjoyed your night off, William. I take it that you are now ready to resume your duties as the royal bodyguard?" "I am, Your Majesty." "Excellent, as we have a busy day ahead." Samuel awoke with a start and a shiver. The first thing Samuel noticed was the light streaming in through the frost-laden window. The second was how cold it was. Swiftly turning his attention to the fire, he tossed on a couple of logs and, using the poker, encouraged the fire back into life. For the next hour, Samuel was busy tidying away the mess that he and his guests had made, seeing to his ablutions, and generally getting his little house and himself back into order, and of course, making a cup of tea. Sitting down in front of his blazing fire, sipping his tea, Samuel surveyed his quiet and empty house. The silence was nearly deafening. Looking out the window, he could see the snow falling. It promised to be a cold and icy day, too cold and too icy to go outside. Sitting in his chair with his blanket round his shoulders, Samuel waited for the weather to get better so he could go outside, waited for a letter from his daughter-in-law. It should only be another month before it arrived, and finally he waited for another year to pass, so it would be time for his old friend to arrive, and they could talk about the past, sit in companionable silence, and drink tea. Being old and alone, waiting was all he could do. The end.